Shalom, shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah, Gwadash, double honor to our apostles who are elders who rule well. Blessings and salutations to you brothers out there teaching and enduring truth and sincerity. This is Abamar for the Nebraska campus, GMS in Fort, Nebraska. Yeah, man, I want to title this lesson the beginning of the fall of Babylon was the 1950s. Okay, the 1950s, everything leading up to that was, it was things that happened. For lack of better words, you had, Jim Crow, you had slavery, you had, World War I, but the 1950s is where America hit its peak and everything began to spiral out of control. As the scripture says, let's get it here. So we're going to go into 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3. Okay, as the things are written aforetime are written for our learning. Okay, it says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now, specifically, this is going over the time of the Roman Empire, okay, which happened with the falling away of Israel when we fled into the wilderness, okay. But again, that was a prelude, for these times, where there's a falling away, and we're gonna go into the wilderness, which is the chariots, man, in these times, okay. But the man of sin, which is Esau, in that time it was the Roman Empire, which were Edomites, being revealed. Okay, now one may say Romans were not Edomites. They originated as Japhet, Ramus, and Remus. But after time, it became a mixed culture similar to Babylon, but it was ran ultimately by Edomites, which is similar to Babylon, okay, aka America. Now, I was reading this book, How the World Works, okay, and within the first chapter in itself, I got into the book a little bit via audio. So I had decided to buy it and read it, but the first chapter in itself, says something very pivotal, okay? It says relations between the United States and other countries obviously go back to the origins of U.S. history, but World War II was a real watershed, so let's begin there. That's very pivotal because World War II was around what time? Again, remember the beginning of the fall. All right. And by the way, the World War II is prophesied within the scriptures, and we'll get that just to prove it. Okay, World War II was a global conflict that lasted from 1939 to 1945, engaging in more than 50 nations and resulting in a widespread devastation as an estimated 60 to 80 million casualties. It is often considered the deadliest and most destructive war in human history. And there was a couple aspects that was said about that war that's eye-opening. Took all the men out, got them killed, and then they put in propaganda. And the government became the men or the leaders to that. But they left all, weak men and blah, blah, blah. Going back to the point, I want to read that. There was something that said, it says, while most of our industrial rivals were either severely weakened or totally destroyed by the war, the United States benefited enormously from it. Our national territory was never under attack, and U.S. production was more than tripled. Okay? The men left. The women worked factory. But the thing is that they weren't getting bombed over here. All right? Because that's why the scriptures call the U.S. the virgin daughter of Babylon. Okay? We'll get that. Okay, so we're going to go to Isaiah 47:1. It says, "Come and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate." You know, this is a prophecy that hasn't come to pass yet. And it's talking about the destruction of Babylon, aka America, through thermonuclear missiles. But before that destruction comes, there's going to be warfare here, and troops are going to actually touch the ground here, and it's going to be the first time that America has experienced that. Because as much as America's been in wars, this country in itself has never been involved in the receiving of the war. They haven't had any rockets hit them. They haven't had any troops come and land, and that has a lot to do with the strategic positioning of America and their foreign relations. Okay, but that's why they're considered the foreign daughter. So I mean the virgin daughter. Now, when you think about that, like, bro, why everybody like, wow, Germany getting bombed? Because when you go into Germany in I believe it was World War II. I think it was World War One. I think it was World War One. Germany, it was all about economics and productive and being a world leader. After the 1950s is where America emerged as the world leader, because you pretty much watch all the big homies scuffle, and then when you seen your opportunity, you ran in and snuck one of the guys and got the edge, right? You ain't get knocked around, you ain't get bloodied up. You know what I'm saying? So you just chilled, threw your bombs and got to where you were at. You know what I'm saying? And you were untouched. So this is what helped Babylon surge economically. Okay? And when they surged economically after that war, there was a lot of ramping up of the devil showing his horns. Okay, and that's why I read that verse in Thessalonians of the man of sin being revealed, because I'm going to go over a list of things that were happening during that time. All right, so I looked up on something on let's see here. I don't know if it moved her around or what. Okay, let's see here. Because I was looking it up. I did an AI overview start off. Just to start it off, it says major events surrounding the 1950s. It says the 1950s were a decade of significant global and domestic change, particularly marked by the Cold War, which is the nuclear missiles, the rise of the civil rights movement in the United States, and major scientific advancements. And they'll just say scientific advancements, but you had enriched uranium, nuclear power, which relates to nuclear power, contraceptives, the birth of eugenics and Planned Parenthood, other contraceptives and pills. I think I forget. Oh no, I'm thinking about the 1980s with that first diet pill. But they had a bunch of other pills that were popping up and coming out from, which goes back to the psychiatric ADD and all that. Matter of fact, so when you go into ADHD, like I said, with the contraceptives, in the 1950s through the 1960s, the term minimum brain dysfunction was used, and stimulant medications like Benzodrine and Ritalin were increasingly used to treat the symptoms. Okay, and you go to these videos, they have concepts, and this is when I forget I did a lesson on it, but consent, the law of consent that really happened during the time of not the Nazis doing scientific experiments on the so-called JEOOs, okay, and because it wasn't no like torturous acts going on. It was the scientific experiments, if anything, and they did it without consent and just was experimenting on these people. Now you got to understand, when you go into connecting the dots, America has spies, they have CIA, they have all this, and I say that to say that more than likely they knew about what was going on in Nazi Germany and what things they were finding out and advancing on, which is why after World War II, they took a lot of the German doctors. Some of them fled in South America, but the rest they took and they utilized those doctors. They didn't say, hey, we're going to make you the good guys now. No, they said, do what you was doing over there, but do it for us. Which enriched uranium, MK Ultra, Project Paperclip, these were a lot of, which again is the 1950s. They found out how to psychologically diagnose people. They found out contraceptives to help suppress it. This is when they started dealing with PCP, weed, and things like that. And they did their studies on it to see, they was trying to find truth serums and all that type of crazy stuff, man. Esau really was digging his hands into the fatness of the earth at this time. You know what I'm saying? We're dealing with, from the science to the resources to all kind of things. All right, so going back into major events surrounding, you had the Korean War, the rise of McCarthyism, while later year saw the Montgomery Boys boycott, the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision, and launch of Sputnik. Okay, so that's some decent events, but when you go deeper into it, and I ain't gonna name them all off, it's a lot of things that happened during surrounding the 1950s. I ain't gonna say specifically on the 1950s, but because the World War II wasn't surrounding the 1950s. Oh, let's get that precept as well. Okay. Because all this was prophesied in the scriptures. All right. In Revelation, the 11th chapter, it'll tell you about, we'll start Revelation 11 to 12. The whole chapter goes in, but just to get straight to the point, it says, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And the same hour there was an earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain men of 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the Most High of heaven. The second woe is past, and the third woe cometh quickly. Okay, and that second woe is talking about World War II. Okay, it also goes into the World War One, but Germany was a real pivotal power, okay, within that war, okay, because like the origins of this economic battle, it really started during World War One, because when you go into the three cousins, in World War One, the three prominent cousins who were, I'm reading an AI overview, who were also monarchs of major European powers were King George V of Great Britain, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. All these three were relatives, and which shows a monopoly in itself, and they were doing things that were conducive to each other. All right, but Germany's production was excelling. Okay, and England thought they had a grip on it, and England thought they had a grip on it. They wanted to control it, but jealousy arose and things like that, and they manufactured triggering a war. Okay, I believe, and it was a Kaiser Wilhelm. I think Kaiser Wilhelm's brother. He was supposed to be in the spot or something like that. I get it mixed up. I haven't dug into it in a while, but there was like a brother, and one of them pretty much was a puppet, but he wasn't on shit, and I always get him and Kaiser Wilhelm mixed up. I forget if it was Kaiser that was the one that was on it, that was the manipulated one. I believe he was, and the brother that was the hunter, you know what I'm saying, but he wasn't into it was one of them, but you can get into the story, but they pretty much got Kaiser to do it. They try to put assassination attempt on Kaiser, with the Black Hand, and that really started everything. You know what I'm saying? Which is it's just all fucking twisted and manipulation and conspiring. When people call it conspiracy theories, America has a CIA. Okay, that's a walking conspiracy. All right. But that's a different subject for a different time. Let's get back to what I wanted to get into. So I looked on Wikipedia, and I got the timeline of the history of the United States from 1950 to 1969, and I just read certain things within it, because you got they mention McCarthyism is a political practice defined by the political repression and persecution of left-wing individuals, and a campaign spreading fear of communist and Soviet influence on American institutions, and of Soviet espionage in the United States during the late 1940s. And this is the same thing going on with the BLM, the woke movement. It's just a song and dance to have you play sides. Okay, you had the Korean War. Okay, during the 1950s, you had television that came up. All right, that's your propaganda, which has a major influence, and that was the beginning of it. And NBC aired, different things of that nature. The 22nd Amendment, the 1951, was established. That limited the number of times a president could be elected. There was once they won that war, they was setting up like, all right, everybody can't have this. We got to split this pie up. All right. The Japanese Peace Treaty Conference. Okay. See here, there's a couple other ones that I wanted to get to. You got the ANZUS Treaty, Immigration and Nationality Act in 1952. It says, also known as the McCarran-Walter Act, confide under Title 8 of the United States Code, governs immigration to and citizenship in the United States. It came into effect June 27, 1952. So that was your Immigration Act. All right, they were sitting up as a world power, displaying, spreading their wings, showing the world that they were the man. There was also a Foreign Relations Act that was implemented. Okay, I believe I'm able to get to that, but in 1953, Shah of Iran returns to power. in a CIA orchestrated coup known as Operation Ajax. All right. Um, it's a list of things up in here. I just name them, but there's ones I want to stop at. The detonation of Castle Bravo, a 15 megaton hydrogen bomb on Bikini Atoll, 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki weapons. It vaporized 3 islands, displaced, and islanders caused long-lasting contamination. And this whole communism thing was crazy in itself, because it was a fight for economic power, and communism was making its stance. Ain't no different from BRICS, and other powers. They try to demonize it and call it, make a reason why people should go to war and go against them. In 1954, the CIA overthrows Guatemala's president, and this is very important because when America became that world power, they had to ensure that they kept their power, because another thing that happened was the Dow Jones had hit its peak around the 1950s, and that happened because after the war, there's stocks, there's trades, there's bonds, there's the fatness of the earth. And they've gained a lot of it, so of course your stock is going to rise. Okay, so with that being said, third world countries is where the stocks were at: the gold, the pineapples, the oranges, the resources. You know what I'm saying? Even the drugs. Now we're told that drugs and money is what all the no, that's not resources. Resources is real resources. Okay, water, food, land. Okay, things of that nature. Okay, it says the Brown versus Board. We mentioned that, where a landmark decision of the Supreme Court declares state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students and denying children equal education opportunities unconstitutional. They were because they didn't need to separate everybody. They had true power. All the men were gone. Television. So now education, during utilizing the Prussian school system method, which happened around the same damn time. Now the Prussian school system has always been being pushed, but the system of making it mandatory for everybody, because schooling never used to be mandatory. After time, it became mandatory, and people actually became dumber dealing with it. Now, there are people that didn't have education, but the people that did were way more educated. Children knew how to read, understand, comprehension, because they were shown the practicality. They were shown the things that were practical to life, and not all this fluff and stupidity that they teach you. Okay. McDonald's opened its first fast food restaurant. The murder of Emmett Till, Rosa Parks, the Warsaw Pact, which established mutual defense treaties subscribed by 8 communist states in Eastern Europe. Disneyland opens Anaheim in California. They talk about rock and roll and all that. Rock and roll, the Sugar Bowl. Like, America hit its peak, bro. America was doing their thing. All right. In God We Trust was adopted as a national motto. Like you could tell the energy after that war, bro. They became the man. That's like a boxer becoming heavyweight champion. That was America. You know what I'm saying? They hit their peak, and then when they hit their peak, they started getting crazy. The Civil Rights Act of 1957, which was bullshit, and it all was to conform Jake and to integrate him a part of a bigger system. The shipping port atomic power station. The first commercial nuclear power plant in the U.S. goes into service in 1957, even though was working on it because the atomic bombs were dropping. But this became where, well, I don't know too much about that, but the nuclear power came after that. All right. It says the National Defense Education Act. All right. Which is it says the NDA was among many science initiatives implemented by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1958 to increase the technological sophistication of power of the United States alongside for assistance DARPA and NASA. It followed a growing national sense that U.S. scientists were falling behind scientists in the Soviet Union. The earliest Soviets' success in the space catalyzed a national sense of unease with Soviet technological advances, especially after the Soviet Union launched the first satellite Sputnik in the previous year. So yeah, this is an economic fight, okay, that was going on, and that's why they pushed that narrative, that lie, that they went out of space, which they did not. They never went out of space. Okay, they just had to come up with something to compete with Russia, ultimately trying to get the superior air advantage. Then sending that among the stars, it was on their spirit. Okay. NASA, 1958, NASA formed as the U.S. begins ramping up efforts to explore space. Okay. There's another one, the Cuban Revolution. Alaska and Hawaii became the 49th and 50th state. Okay. United States as of January 2025. All right. That has a big part to play in the annexation. Okay. And there was another one that I had. Yeah. Damn. Yeah, I lost the spot for it. But just going over the list of things that's showing you how pivotal that time was. All right. So it's like somebody sending me notifications. So getting back to this chapter in the book is called How the World Works by Noam Chomsky. Interviewed by David Barsamian, edited by Arthur Naiman. I know how to say his name. But getting back to it, it says, even before the war, the United States had been by far the leading industrial nation in the world. Okay, which before then in the 1700s, you had the Industrial Revolution. All right, but in order to sell all this stuff, you got to get worldwide connection, worldwide control. Okay, so after World War II, that put them in place. They gave them the connects that they need. They gave them the control that they need, the resources and the people. Okay, because a lot of these people had to make deals. From Vietnam, they had to make deals. Iran had to make a deal. A lot of these countries that were taken over, had to make deals and have to use either their resources or get their resources used. Okay. So even before the war, the United States had been by far the leading industrial nation in the world, as it had been since the turn of the century. Now, however, we had literally 50% of the world's wealth and control both sides of the ocean. There never been a time in history when one power had such overwhelming control of the world or such overwhelming security. The people who determined U.S. policy were well aware that the United States would emerge from World War II The people, I'm going to repeat that sentence again. The people who determined U.S. policy were well aware that the United States would emerge from World War II as the first global power in history. All right, this is all business deals. This is all for control of economics and the fatness of the earth. All right, it says, and during and after the war, they were carefully planning how to shape the power star, the post-war world. And I just read you hella examples of how that was going on. And on top of the things that they don't tell you. Okay, like I said, with the experimentation, the project paperclip, MK Ultra, a lot of that stuff happened during that time because they were advancing. All right. It says, since this is an open society, we can read their plans, which were very, very frank and clear. U.S. planners, from those in the State Department to those of the Council of Foreign Relations, quote, not quote, but parentheses, one major channel by which business leaders influence foreign policy. So this is where they were able to spread the fatness of the earth or get their grips, is through the Council of Foreign Relations. Agreed that dominance of the United States had to be maintained, but was a spectrum of opinion about how to do it. So they was figuring out how to do it. And you had science, you had war, you had different aspects on how you wanted to get that done. All right. So with that being said, they addressed it in many ways. It says at the hardline extreme, you have documents like, National Security Council Memorandum 68 in the 1950s. All right. So, this is just proving, that there's a lot, the devil showed his horns from the 1950s on up until now. There are a lot of things happening, but it ain't no different from like what happened in 2020. 2020 was a catalyst to things, to like a transition from, into technology and getting us comfortable with it. You know what I'm saying? More control. A lot of that happened. The 1950s was very pivotal. You know what I'm saying? And it led up to QR codes being everywhere. It led up to, coins being gone. Credit cards. Credit cards came out in the 1950s. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, there's a lot of stuff. And it all was their time to, their rich elite to say, okay, now it's time to start setting forth our new world order plans. You know what I'm saying? Even though it was inceptionalized in, 1776, they came together and said, hey, this is what we should do. Once they start collecting all certain, getting their chess pieces in certain positions, then they say, okay, now it's time to really put the tires to the ground. Let's get this baby on the road. I just thought that was interesting, and I share with you brothers, man. With that being said, we're going to give all praises unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Bachakwadash, the honest apostles who are elders who rule well. Blessings and salutations to you brothers out there teaching and enduring truth, sincerity. Shalom.